Okay, so I want to provide for you 10 tips for preparing your students for the Excel Associate exam. And some of these tips could also be used for the Expert exam, but I'm just going to primarily focus on the Associate exam. All right, so the first thing I would recommend is to record and post your lessons. Uh, in many instances, we have students who are not the best of readers, and I'm just a big believer in allowing students to not only see these skills demonstrated, but to hear them explained by the teacher. I use TechSmith Camtasia Recorder for my lessons. I've been using that since before Screencastify was even an option. And again, I'm a big believer in doing this. And the great thing about it is you only have to make a lesson once, and you really don't have to do it again. So it's really helpful if you teach the same lessons over and over and over. And this will also allow students to rewind or review as needed, whatever the correct term is nowadays. And you don't necessarily have to record every lesson. Usually what I'll do is I will teach something maybe 3 times. When I introduce a new skill, I'll teach it maybe 3 times or include it in 3 different videos, but you don't necessarily have to make a lesson for every video. And by the way, all of this, or make a video for every lesson. And I started to say that, I've created a lot of my own activities that will allow me to do the next thing that I recommend is to integrate objectives from other domains into the lessons. If you look, most of the skills that are covered in the textbook, they're only taught 1 time per lesson, and then you might have a couple of opportunities per lesson to practice, but you only do it once. So, for example, something that's simple like showing the formulas, well, that is its own objective on the exam. And all you have to do is to click a button under the Formulas tab to show your formulas. Switching the row and column data on a chart, that's another one of those skills where all you have to do is to click a button, and you have to know what button to click. So a lot of these skills, I think the students don't get enough opportunity to practice. And that kind of leads me into the third item is I create rubrics for students to follow that represent exam objectives. Now, I typically will give full credit, partial credit, or no credit, but in some instances you can't even really give partial credit. But the maximum points will be based upon the difficulty of the task or number of steps involved to get there. Now, again, showing the formulas, that's something that you could really do every lesson, and if that's the case, you might want to only make that worth 2 points since you can do that every lesson. You just make the student click the show formula button before they save it and turn it in. The other thing you got to do is you got to get used to not having every assignment equal to be 100 points. I've got, the way I do my classes, some assignments are worth 12 points and then some assignments are worth 190. So I think you have to get rid of that mindset of everything having to equal 100%. Something else that I like to do is I take the activities often and I will break them into multiple parts, which makes it easier for me to cover all of the objectives. Now, first of all, on the exam, students are not going to have to create anything from scratch, probably. I have taken so many versions of these myself, and I have proctored so many exams, and there are very few instances where students are going to be asked to do anything from scratch. So they're going to be taking a document that's already edited, and they're going to have to, or the document that's already created, then they're going to have to edit it. And some of the skills, it's kind of hard to teach and verify that students know how to do it unless you do it in this method. So, for example, inserting rows or columns into a chart, to me that's kind of hard to verify based upon the method that I use to teach my courses, whether or not students actually know how to do that. Again, it kind of depends upon the nature of the lessons that are given. Or adding data series to a chart. One of the things I like doing is give students a copy of of the solution file of the PDF in PDF format, so they'll have an idea of what it should look like when done, if done correctly. Well, if you do that, if you give them what the end result will be, sometimes they'll jump ahead to the end result and see what it should be, but then they don't know how to, as was mentioned previously, to take the activity and to break it into multiple parts. And also, for example, sometimes it's easy but one of the things students may have to do in the exams is to save a file as an Excel 97 2003 file, or to save it as a PDF file. Again, sometimes there are some skills that or some things that you do, especially if you have to save it to a 9703 file format, that will not carry over. So again, sometimes it's just best to have break the activities into multiple parts to give students to clearly demonstrate their ability to do those tasks. I also like to phrase tasks on the rubrics. I try to phrase those similar to how it's going to be phrased on the exam. And terminology is vital. So, for example, on the exam, they're not going to tell you to use the sum function to get a total of a range of cells. What they're going to do is to tell you simply to provide a function that will give you the total of a range of cells. Or, they may tell you to include a function that will include an amount in the total only if it meets a certain criteria, or if it may say meet two criteria. So, you got to know that would be the sum if function, or the sum ifs function. And so again, you got to learn to phrase your objectives, or your rubrics and your tasks to students, how it's going to be phrased on the exam. It's also important to make sure you teach the use of the name box and the to-go feature, or the go-to feature, to navigate to named ranges. Now, I'm going to drag an Excel file open. And by the way, this Excel file, if you're using 2019 365, there is a formula tutorial, and there's a couple of tutorials that are up here that are very useful for students that you can download and give to those students. But for example, you could use this name box right here, because they may ask students to select all of the data from the range that's named bananas. And they may forget that all you got to do is to select the range that's over here, and then select it, and then you can hit delete. And at least it makes it easy to find. I've seen students struggle with that. Also, make sure they understand how to come over here and use the go-to feature under Find and Select, because it's the same thing. It lists all the ranges, and a student could click on it, and then click OK, and then it'll take you, and it should select that range right here. And as you see right here, and I guess I could on this document see if it'll let me scroll over to the left a little bit, and here it is. It selects that range for me that's named apples, which is what I selected. So again, it's important to make sure that students know how to use those features. All right, so some other things that I think are vital to help students is to learn to use the insert function box to search for the correct variation of functions. If I come back and open up this same spreadsheet here, notice there's the function wizard. And they talk about using the function wizard, and I like using that. And again, what I'm going to do here is they've got a function in here, but I want to click on the insert function box to open up that wizard. And it's going to show you, it's a screenshot of what you see right here. But let's say you were starting from scratch. Now, you may be asked on the exam to edit a function, but a function, I would say you're more likely to have to create this from scratch, meaning you're going to be in an empty cell. So what if you knew, for example, based upon what you were being told to do, that you knew it was one of the lookup functions, but you didn't know if it was a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP? So what you could do is to click on this button, and then you could type in lookup, and then click go, and then you would see all of the variations of lookup. Now, on the 2019 version of Excel, you even see XLOOKUP, which is really supposed to replace V and H lookup. But my point is this: you could click on these and then look down here and get a description of what these individual functions do. So maybe you knew it was a lookup, but you didn't know exactly which one. And you would at least get a description down here that would help. And again, very similar. What if it was a variation of the sum function? I can type in sum, and we're going to get sum if, and some ifs. And then we're going to get some other that will not be on the exams. Now, by the way, don't forget that the functions that are mentioned in the page of objectives, when you look at those objectives on the exam, the only ones that are going to be covered are the ones specifically mentioned. So you could click on some if and some ifs, and it will give you here, it will give you a description. I clicked one too far. And again, it gives you a description of what each does. And then if you find out, oh, okay, well, it's some ifs that I need, then I click OK, and then it's the same thing. Each of these, as is mentioned down here, each of these fields that you click in, it gives you a description of what goes into each of these fields. So again, I think that this is a very important skill for students to master for the exam. I also think it's important to emphasize to students that when they need to do something where they need to work on a table or a chart or some other object, is to make sure that you tell them to click it first. Because when you click on it, it's going to open up tabs that are related to whatever it is that they need to click on. Now right now I've got PowerPoint open, but if I were to click up here, I get just your basic tabs. But what if I were to insert a picture down here somewhere, which I can do just for the sake of example, but then I can go insert actually let me just put in a picture, online images, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about doing this when I started this, but again, when you insert a picture, whatever it is you're going to do, I love animals, let me do that. And let me just put, I love tigers, so there you go, works perfect for me. So I'm going to insert it. So when I insert that picture, then it automatically takes me and opens up tabs that are related to the object that I've clicked on. And I think a lot of times students forget that. And so you could even make sure that you stress to them that they right click, and they're going to see commands that are commonly associated with the object. And again, I can open up Excel down here, and here's a table. It's the same thing that, well, it depends upon how they formatted it. Here we go. This is formatted as a shape with a text box in it. So when you click on that, it opens up the Format Shape tab. And down here, now these apparently are not formatted as a table, they're just formatted as colored cells, but here's an image right here. So if I click on that, it opens up the picture format tab. And again, there's a good chance that whatever the students are going to be asked to do is going to be underneath that tab that's going to activate when students actually click on it. So make sure you emphasize that they click on the object first, and they may have to slow down and take their time to find the correct button. Something else that I think is very important, and you probably wouldn't think about this unless you get the opportunity to proctor exams like I get. Now, as a teacher, when I create the exam, I like to start students off with the easy task first, in order to build their confidence. And the certification exams don't necessarily do that. They may get some of their hardest tasks first. So what I always tell students to do is to not spend more than 45 seconds on a task if they are just completely stuck. If they're completely stuck, what they can do is they can click the Mark for Review button. That'll be at the bottom of the exam directions, and it'll put that flag on it, and then they can come back to it. And I'll even go as far as say to make sure you tell students, don't be surprised if the entire first project, which typically has multiple tasks, don't be surprised if all of those seem kind of hard. It may be best that they just go ahead and go to the second project. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. You got to build your confidence, and I wish there was a way these tests could be created where, you know, for example, again on the Excel exam, the first thing they told you to do was display the formulas of a particular page. That all you'd have to do is go and click that one button, and you know that you did it correctly, and that will build your confidence. So the other thing is, tell me what you want to do is available on the exam. So on the exam, this feature right here will be available to students. Now, if they're doing the 2019 exam, you probably would have to come up here under the search field. I know that on 2016 exams, tell me what you want to do is not available. And again, I'm using this. I've got 2019 on this computer. So if that is, again, that's something that I honestly need to check into. But tell me what you want to do is available on the exams. The help menu itself is disabled on those exams. So make sure students realize that. They could use it in a pinch, but they don't have time to use it for every task. And then finally, make sure you teach time-saving skills. You know, the exam is 50 minutes long. Students need to know how to use the keyboard shortcuts, because, you know, for example, if you want to bold something, it may be easier just to hit Control B to bold something. And as I mentioned, the keyboard shortcuts are the right clicking of the objects to open up the quick menu for whatever object the students are working on. Holding down Control and clicking or selecting non-adjacent cells, that's really important. You know, using the Format Painter. You know, a student may be told to take all of the formatting from one part of a document or from one cell and to paste those however they phrase it, but paste it into a different cell. Well, what they're wanting you to do is to use Format Painter. And, you know, some students may just look at a cell and say, well, that's bolded, that's italicized, and that's, you know, they just may literally look under the font menu and try to figure all that out when all they're wanting you to do is use Format Painter. And also, I've included a link that was just sent to me today, and I'm going to roll this over here and leave that so you'll see it in the video. But excelcampus.com is got this video that it's very good, or this web page, I should say, that explains some of the table shortcuts when you're working inside a table, and tables are definitely on the exam. You know, even something as simple as using some combination of Control and your arrow keys to select an entire row or an entire column of data that may be in a table. Now, it may be in a range. You remember, a range can look like a table but not necessarily have the functionality of a table. And if that's the case, you may need to apply formatting. You may need to select an entire row or an entire column. But again, I'm going to leave this up here for you because I've looked at it. It's very useful, and I think it would be worth passing along to students, as would be this workbook tutorial working on this formula tutorial. And again, you could go, when you go into Microsoft Excel, that would be available for you. So that is it for this. Again, I'm here to help you. And again, there are so many tips that we could provide students. I mean, remember, there's a whole class on this, and I'm trying to keep this video to under 20 minutes to hit on what I think are the most important things to stress to students. So again, please let me know if you have any questions or concerns, or want me to provide any other tutorials for you and your students.